I'm sitting in this beachfront cafe in Phuket right now, and I need to tell you something that's going to completely change how you think about Southeast Asian travel. For the past 3 weeks, I've been doing something absolutely insane. I took the same budget, the same travel style, the same expectations, and I split my time between Phuket, Thailand, and 3 different locations across Malaysia. And what I discovered is going to shock you, because everyone keeps telling you these 2 destinations are basically the same experience with minor differences. They're wrong. Dead wrong. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why one of these places gave me experiences I'll remember for the rest of my life, while the other left me wondering why I didn't just stay home. Before I reveal which one came out on top, you need to understand how I actually tested this. Because I see so many travel videos where someone spends 2 days in a place, eats at one restaurant, stays at one hotel, and suddenly they're an expert. That's not what happened here. I created what I call the ultimate travel stress test. Same budget of $3,000 for everything. Same types of activities. Same accommodation standards. Same food exploration approach. I even wore the same outfits in both places just to keep the variables identical. And I documented everything with actual receipts, actual prices, actual experiences. Because I knew people would call me out if I didn't have the evidence. Let me start with what everyone cares about first. The beaches. Because if you're going to Southeast Asia, you're probably dreaming about those perfect Instagram beaches with turquoise water and white sand. Phuket has Patong Beach, which everyone knows about. And when I got there at 7 in the morning, before the crowds arrived, I understood why it's famous. The water has this incredible clarity, and the sand is genuinely soft. But here's what nobody tells you in those travel guides. By 10 a.m., that beach transforms into something completely different. I counted, and I'm not exaggerating. There were 47 beach vendors who approached me in a single hour. Jet ski rentals, massage offers, fruit sellers. People trying to braid my hair. Someone even tried to sell me a live hermit crab. Every single minute, someone wanted something from me. And the noise. The constant noise of jet skis and speedboats and music from competing beach bars creates this overwhelming sensory assault that makes it impossible to relax. So I thought maybe I just picked the wrong beach. I went to Freedom Beach, which is supposed to be this hidden gem, and it is more beautiful. The water is clearer, the sand is whiter, there are fewer people. But getting there requires either a sketchy long-tail boat ride that costs way more than it should, or a treacherous hike down a cliff that had me genuinely concerned for my safety. And when you're there, you're kind of trapped. You can't just leave easily if you want to grab lunch somewhere else, or if the weather turns bad, which it did on my second visit. And I ended up huddling under a beach umbrella with 8 strangers for an hour waiting for the rain to pass. Now let me tell you about the beaches in Malaysia, and this is where things get interesting. I went to Langkawi first, because it's the most comparable to Phuket in terms of development and tourism infrastructure. Pantai Sanong is the main beach, and when I first saw it, I thought, okay, this is nice, but it's not going to compete with Thailand. The sand isn't quite as white. The water isn't quite as clear. But then something happened that changed everything. I was sitting there reading a book, and I realized something shocking. Nobody had bothered me for 45 minutes. Not a single vendor. Not a single person trying to sell me anything. There were vendors on the beach. Sure. But they stayed at their little stands and let you come to them if you wanted something. The difference in experience was absolutely massive. I could actually relax. I could actually think. I could actually enjoy being on a beach without constantly having to say no thank you to someone. But it gets better, and this is the part that started to tip the scales for me. I took a day trip to the smaller islands around Langkawi, places like Pulau Deong Bunting and Pulau Singabesar. And these beaches, these hidden beaches that cost me $12 total to reach by boat, were more beautiful than anything I saw in Phuket. The water was so clear I could see fish swimming around my feet in waist-deep water. The sand was completely empty except for a few other tourists. And the best part, the part that made me actually laugh out loud when I realized it, was that the boat operator who took us there gave us 3 hours to explore and didn't charge us a single extra baht. In Phuket, every single boat tour I looked at had hidden fees and add-ons and unexpected charges that doubled the advertised price. Then I went to the Perhentian Islands in Malaysia, and this is where I realized that this comparison wasn't even going to be close. The Perhentian Islands are this collection of small islands off the east coast, and getting there requires a ferry ride from the mainland. The water there is so impossibly blue and clear that my camera couldn't even capture properly. People watching the footage thought I edited it or used some kind of filter. I didn't. That's actually what it looks like. And the beaches are long stretches of powder-soft sand with jungle coming right down to the water's edge. I spent an entire day on Long Beach and counted exactly 7 other people. 7. On a beach that's probably half a kilometer long. But I know what you're thinking. Beaches are just one part of the experience. What about the food? Because Southeast Asia is famous for having some of the best food in the world, and Thailand specifically has a reputation for incredible cuisine. So I made it my mission to eat at the same types of places in both locations. Street food, mid-range restaurants, and one fancy dinner in each place. And I tracked every single meal with prices and detailed notes about the experience. Phuket's food scene is legitimately excellent. I had pad thai from a street cart that was so good, I went back the next day for seconds. I had massaman curry at a family-run restaurant that made me understand why Thai food is so beloved around the world. The flavors are bold. The ingredients are fresh. Everything is cooked with this perfect balance of sweet, sour, salty, and spicy. But here's the thing that started to bother me after a few days. Almost every restaurant I went to in the tourist areas had the exact same menu. Pad Thai, green curry, tom yum soup, mango sticky rice, which are all delicious. Don't get me wrong, but I started to feel like I was eating the same meal over and over again with minor variations. And the prices in the tourist areas were honestly shocking. A plate of fried rice that should cost $50 was being sold for $7. A simple papaya salad was $6. A beer was anywhere from $4 to $8, depending on how close you were to the beach. I kept having to walk 15 or 20 minutes away from the tourist zones to find reasonable prices. And even then, I was paying more than I expected. Malaysia's food situation is completely different, and I mean that in the best possible way. First of all, Malaysia is this incredible mix of Malay, Chinese, Indian, and indigenous cultures, which means the food diversity is absolutely insane. In a single day in Penang, I had roti canai for breakfast, which is this flaky Indian flatbread with curry. Then I had hokkien mee for lunch, which is this dark noodle dish with prawns and pork. And then I had nasi lemak for dinner, which is coconut rice with anchovies and peanuts and a spicy sambal. 3 completely different cuisines, all equally delicious, all authentic to Malaysia. And the prices made me do a double take on my receipts, because I thought I was reading them wrong. That roti canai breakfast cost me $1.20. The hokkien mee was $2.80. The nasi lemak dinner was $3.50. I'm talking about full meals that left me completely satisfied, not snacks or small portions. I could eat 3 excellent meals a day in Malaysia for less than the cost of a single mediocre lunch in tourist area Phuket. But the real revelation came when I discovered Malaysian hawker centers. These are basically large food courts with dozens of individual vendors, each specializing in 1 or 2 dishes that they've been perfecting for decades. I went to Gurney Drive Hawker Center in Penang, and I counted 73 different food stalls. 73 different options. Everything from char kway teow to rojak, to sendal to satay to laksa. And every single thing I tried was outstanding, because these vendors aren't trying to do everything. They're focused on doing one thing perfectly. I met a woman who'd been making the same popiah spring rolls for 38 years. Just that one dish. And they were the best spring rolls I've ever eaten in my life. And they cost 90 cents for 3 of them. Now, let me talk about something that doesn't get enough attention in travel videos. The actual experience of being a tourist in these places. The vibe. The feeling you get walking around. Because this matters more than people realize. I've been to beautiful places that felt stressful and uncomfortable, and I've been to less objectively beautiful places that felt amazing because the energy was right. Phuket has this hustle culture that never stops. From the moment you step out of your hotel, people are trying to get money from you. Tuk-tuk drivers follow you down the street offering rides. Tour operators chase you with brochures. Shop owners call out to you constantly. And I get it. These people are trying to make a living, and tourism is their industry. But it creates this exhausting dynamic where you can't just exist without being in a constant state of negotiation and refusal. I found myself taking weird routes just to avoid certain streets where I knew the hassling would be intense. And there's something else that bothered me more than I expected. Phuket feels very manufactured for tourists. Like, there are parts of the island that feel like they were designed by a committee specifically to extract maximum money from visitors while giving them a sanitized, safe version of Thai culture. You got Irish pubs next to fake cultural shows next to massage parlors that are definitely not just massage parlors next to family-friendly restaurants. Everything is jumbled together in this weird way that doesn't feel authentic to anything. The traffic is absolutely horrendous. I spent more time sitting in traffic in Phuket than I spent actually doing activities some days. The roads are narrow and chaotic. There's scooters everywhere going in every direction, and getting from one side of the island to the other can take over an hour, even though it's not that far geographically. I wanted to visit the Big Buddha, which is one of the main attractions, and it took me 90 minutes to get there from my hotel, even though it's only 15 kilometers away. Malaysia felt like an entirely different universe in terms of how I was treated as a tourist. In Langkawi, people would say hello and smile, but nobody was aggressively trying to sell me anything. Shop owners would let me browse in peace. Tour operators would give me information if I asked, but didn't chase me down the street. It created this relaxed atmosphere where I actually want to talk to people and learn about their businesses instead of avoiding eye contact and rushing past. In Penang, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, I spent 3 days just wandering around Georgetown looking at the street art and colonial architecture and temples. And it felt like a real city where real people actually lived and worked, not a theme park for tourists. Yes, there were other tourists there, but they weren't the entire economy. I saw Malaysian families having lunch at the same hawker stalls I was eating at. I saw local artists selling their actual work, not mass-produced souvenirs. I saw temples that were being used for actual religious purposes by actual believers, not just photo opportunities for Instagram. The Perhentian Islands had this backpacker vibe that reminded me of what Southeast Asia must have been like 20 or 30 years ago before mass tourism changed everything. The accommodations were simple. The restaurants were small family operations. There wasn't McDonald's or Starbucks anywhere to be found. And at night, the beaches would come alive with bonfires and people playing guitar and travelers from all over the world just hanging out and sharing stories. It felt like a real community, even though everyone was just passing through. Let me talk about the activities beyond beaches and food, because there's a lot more to do in both places. Phuket has the advantage of being well established with lots of tour operators and activities. I did a boat tour to Phi Islands, which everyone says you have to do, and the islands themselves are genuinely stunning. Those limestone cliffs rising straight out of the turquoise water are just as dramatic as the photos make them look. But the actual experience of doing that tour was kind of miserable, and I need to be honest about this. Our boat had 75 people on it. 75 people crammed onto a speedboat designed for maybe 50. When we got to Maya Bay, which is the famous beach from the movie The Beach, there were probably 500 tourists there at the same time. You couldn't take a photo without getting dozens of other people in the frame. The water was churned up from all the boats. The sand was covered with footprints and trash that the cleanup crew was constantly trying to remove. We stopped for snorkeling at a couple of spots, and the coral was bleached and damaged, and there were so many people in the water that you were constantly getting kicked or bumped by other swimmers. The fish were there, but they seemed stressed and would scatter as soon as you got close. And the whole tour felt rushed, like we were being herded from one spot to another on a tight schedule, so they could fit in as many tours as possible in a day. I paid $85 for that tour, and honestly, I felt kind of ripped off. I also did an elephant sanctuary visit in Phuket because I wanted to support ethical animal tourism. And the sanctuary I chose had good reviews and claimed to be ethical and not use cruel training methods. The elephants looked healthy, and we got to feed them and bathe them, which was genuinely amazing. These animals are so intelligent and gentle, and being close to them was definitely a highlight. But even that experience felt a bit commercialized, with groups of tourists cycling through every 2 hours and everything happening on a very strict schedule. It cost me $120 for 3 hours. In Malaysia, the activities were just fundamentally different in character. I went snorkeling off the Perhentian Islands, and we took a small boat with 8 people total to a series of spots around the islands. The coral there was actually alive and healthy, full of vibrant colors. I saw sea turtles, multiple sea turtles, just casually swimming around like it was no big deal. I saw reef sharks and massive schools of tropical fish and coral formations that looked like underwater gardens. The visibility was so good, I could see probably 20 or 30 meters in every direction. And we spent as much time as we wanted at each spot. Nobody was rushing us. The guide would just ask if we were ready to move on, and if we said no, we'd stay longer. That tour cost me $35 for the entire day, including lunch on a deserted beach. In Penang, I did a street art walking tour that someone recommended, and this ended up being one of my favorite experiences of the entire trip. Our guide was a local artist who actually knew the people who created the famous murals around Georgetown. He told us the stories behind each piece, the history of the neighborhoods, the cultural significance of different areas. We stopped at coffee shops where locals hung out, not touristy places. We visited temples and clan houses and learned about the Chinese immigrant community that built them. It felt educational and authentic and fun, and it cost me $15 for 4 hours, including coffee and snacks. I hiked up Penang Hill, which gives you this panoramic view of the entire island. You can take a funicular railway up, which is what most tourists do, or you can hike the trail, which I did because I wanted to exercise. The trail goes through jungle and past waterfalls and takes about 2 hours. At the top, there's this colonial-era hotel and some gardens and viewpoints, and it wasn't crowded at all. I pretty much had the trail to myself, and at the summit, there were maybe 20 other people spread across a huge area. Compare that to the Big Buddha in Phuket, where there were literally hundreds of people packed into a relatively small space, all trying to get the same photos. Langkawi has this amazing mangrove tour that I did, where you take a boat through these narrow channels in the mangrove forest. The guide knew exactly where to go to see wildlife. We saw monkeys, otters, kingfishers, eagles, monitor lizards, even a crocodile sunning itself on a log. The guide turned off the motor and let us just drift and watch. There was no noise, no crowds, just us and the wildlife and the sound of the forest. Then we stopped at a fish farm for lunch, and the owner cooked fresh fish and crab that he pulled right out his pens. That whole experience cost me $40 and lasted 6 hours. Now let's talk about accommodations, because where you stay has a massive impact on your overall experience. I stayed at 3-star hotels in both locations because I want to compare similar standards. In Phuket, I paid an average of $65 per night for rooms that were fine, but nothing special. Clean beds, air conditioning that worked, maybe a small pool. The hotels were all pretty similar, with that generic international hotel aesthetic. Decent but forgettable. In Malaysia, I paid an average of $40 per night, and the quality was noticeably better. In Langkawi, my hotel had an amazing breakfast buffet included with fresh tropical fruits and Malaysian specialties. The room was larger, the bed was more comfortable, and it was right on the beach. In Penang, I stayed at a boutique hotel in a restored colonial building with incredible character and history. The staff knew my name after one day and gave me personalized recommendations for restaurants and activities. It felt special, not cookie cutter. On the Perhentian Islands, I stayed at a beach bungalow that was admittedly very basic, but it was literally on the beach. I could walk out my door and be in the ocean in 30 seconds, and it cost $25 per night. In Phuket, being that close to a decent beach would have cost me at least $150 per night. Here's something else that matters a lot, but people don't always think about. How safe and comfortable do you feel walking around at night? In Phuket, especially in Patong, the nightlife scene is intense. Bangalore Road is famous for its bars and clubs and nightlife, and it's definitely an experience. But it's also overwhelming and seedy, and not particularly pleasant if you're not into that scene. There are drunk tourists everywhere, aggressive promoters trying to pull you into bars, and just a general sense of chaos. I'm not judging anyone who enjoys that atmosphere, but it's not for me, and it made me uncomfortable walking around after dark. The rest of Phuket felt reasonably safe, but there wasn't much to do at night outside of the party zones. Restaurants would close early, streets would empty out, and there wasn't really a vibrant local nightlife scene that I could find. It was either intense tourist party zones or nothing. Malaysia had this wonderful middle ground. In Penang, Georgetown comes alive at night with hawker centers and night markets and families out walking around. It feels safe and lively without being chaotic. I could walk around at 11 p.m. and feel completely comfortable. There were street food vendors selling amazing snacks, people hanging out at coffee shops, occasional street performances. It felt like a real city with a real nightlife that wasn't dependent on tourist dollars. Langkawi was quieter at night, but in a peaceful way rather than a boring way. I could take evening walks on the beach without anyone bothering me. There were a few bars and restaurants with live music that had a relaxed vibe. The Perhentian Islands had those beach bonfires and social scenes I mentioned, which felt organic and fun. Let's talk about the people and the cultural interactions, because this ended up being one of the biggest differentiators for me. In Phuket, most of my interactions with locals were transactional. They wanted to sell me something or provide a service. That's not a criticism. That's just the reality of a place that's heavily dependent on tourism. But it meant I never really felt like I connected with anyone or learned much about Thai culture beyond the surface level stuff. In Malaysia, I had numerous genuine conversations with people who weren't trying to get anything from me. The woman at the roti canai stall, who taught me how to properly eat it with my hands, and laughed when I made a mess. The taxi driver in Penang, who spent 30 minutes telling me about his family and his kids, and asked me questions about where I was from. The hotel owner in Langkawi, who sat with me over tea and told me stories about the island before tourism changed it. These interactions made the trip feel meaningful in a way that pure sightseeing never can. I also noticed that Malaysia's multicultural makeup creates this fascinating blend of influences everywhere you go. You see it in the architecture, with Chinese temples next to Indian mosques next to Malay traditional buildings. You see it in the food, with fusion dishes that combine different traditions. You hear it in the languages, with people switching between Malay, English, Mandarin, and Tamil sometimes in the same sentence. Phuket feels much more homogeneous by comparison, and while Thai culture is beautiful, the depth and variety I experienced in Malaysia was on another level. Now I need to address something that people always bring up in these comparisons: the party scene and nightlife. If your primary goal is to drink and party and meet other young travelers, Phuket absolutely has the advantage. Bangla Road in Patong is one of the most famous party streets in Asia, and there are bars and clubs and beach parties everywhere. If that's what you're looking for, Phuket will deliver that experience better than Malaysia. But here's my honest take. If partying is your main objective, there are better places to do that than either of these locations. You could go to Bangkok or Bali or Barcelona or dozens of other places with better nightlife. And if you're traveling all the way to Southeast Asia just to drink with other tourists at Irish pubs and Australian bars, you're kind of missing the point of travel in my opinion. I wanted to experience something different, something I couldn't get at home, and that's where Malaysia really shined. Let me tell you about my overall spending in both places, because this is where the numbers really tell the story. In Phuket, I spent $3,200 over 10 days. That includes accommodation, food, activities, transportation, everything. That breaks down to $320 per day. And I wasn't being extravagant or staying at luxury resorts. I was trying to be a normal tourist, doing normal tourist things. In Malaysia, I spent $2,100 over 11 days across 3 locations. That's $190 per day. And I felt like I did more, saw more, ate better, and had better accommodations. The value difference is absolutely massive. For the same total budget, I could have spent almost 3 weeks in Malaysia instead of just 11 days. But beyond the money, which obviously matters, I want to talk about something more subjective. How did these places make me feel? What memories am I going to carry with me? What stories am I going to tell when I get home? Because that's ultimately what makes a trip successful or not. Phuket gave me some good moments. Watching the sunset from Promthep Cape was genuinely beautiful. That first taste of really excellent pad thai, swimming in the Andaman Sea. These are good memories, but they're not transformative memories. They're not stories I'm dying to tell people. And honestly, by day 7 in Phuket, I was kind of ready to leave. I felt like I had seen what there was to see, eaten what there was to eat, done what there was to do. Malaysia surprised me every single day. Just when I thought I had figured it out, something new would happen. I'd discover a new dish I'd never heard of. I'd have a conversation with someone that changed my perspective on something. I'd stumble onto a temple or a viewpoint or a market that wasn't any guidebook, but was absolutely incredible. On my last day in Penang, I was genuinely sad to leave. I wanted more time. I had a list of a dozen things I didn't get to do yet. The Perhentian island specifically gave me moments of pure joy that I haven't experienced traveling in years. Swimming with sea turtles in crystal clear water. Watching bioluminescent plankton light up the ocean at night. Sitting on the beach with new friends from 5 different countries, sharing travel stories until 2 in the morning. These are the kinds of experiences that remind you why you travel in the first place. Here's the thing that really crystallized it for me. On my second to last day in Malaysia, I was sitting at a hawker center in Penang eating char kway teow and watching families and friends gathered around tables, laughing and talking and enjoying their meals. And I realized I felt completely relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't felt in Phuket. I wasn't on guard against vendors. I wasn't worried about being overcharged. I wasn't exhausted from crowds and noise and traffic. I was just enjoying the moment. Now I know some people watching this are going to say, I'm being unfair to Phuket, that I went to the wrong places or did the wrong things or that my expectations were off. And maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe if I had avoided Patong entirely and stayed in quieter parts of the island, my experience would have been different. Maybe if I had known about hidden local spots that tourists don't usually find, I would have a different opinion. But here's the thing. I was traveling like most normal tourists travel. I went to the recommended places. I did the popular activities. I tried to have the standard Phuket experience. And that experience, while not bad, was significantly less enjoyable than the standard Malaysia experience. I also want to acknowledge that Phuket has infrastructure and convenience that Malaysia sometimes lacks. It's easier to get around in some ways. There are more tour operators offering more activities. The tourism industry is more developed and polished. For some travelers, especially those who value convenience and familiarity, that might be worth the trade-offs. But for me, the rough edges and the less developed infrastructure in parts of Malaysia were part of the charm. It felt more adventurous, more real, more rewarding. The diving and snorkeling comparison deserves special mention because this is huge for a lot of travelers. I'm not a certified diver, so I only did snorkeling, but even from the surface, the difference in marine life and coral health was striking. The reefs around Phuket are damaged from years of mass tourism and boat traffic. You can still see fish and have an okay snorkeling experience, but it's a shadow of what it probably was 20 years ago. The reefs around the Perhentian Islands and other parts of Malaysia are healthier and more vibrant, with better visibility and more diverse marine life. If underwater experiences are important to you, Malaysia wins this category decisively. Shopping is another consideration for many travelers. Phuket has lots of markets and shops selling everything you can imagine, but 90% of it is the same mass-produced souvenirs you can find anywhere in Thailand. Elephant print pants, wooden carvings, refrigerator magnets, t-shirts with phrases in English and Thai. It's fine if you need gifts for people back home, but it's not particularly interesting or unique. Malaysia's markets had more character and variety in my experience. In Penang, I found shops selling traditional Perhentian crafts and textiles that were actually made locally. In Langkawi, there were batik workshops where you could watch artists creating the fabric and even try making some yourself. The products felt more authentic and connected to the place. And the prices were generally better too. Transportation is worth discussing because getting around easily can make or break a trip. Phuket has lots of taxis and tuk-tuks, but they're expensive and they don't use meters, which means you have to negotiate every fare, and you're probably getting overcharged. Renting a scooter is popular, but the traffic is chaotic and dangerous, and I saw multiple accidents during my time there. The local bus system is confusing and infrequent. Malaysia has better public transportation in most places. Penang has decent buses and the famous ferry. Langkawi is small enough that taxis are reasonable, and the drivers actually use meters or agree to fair fixed prices. The Perhentian Islands don't have roads at all, so you walk or take boats, which is actually kind of refreshing. I found it easier and less stressful to get around Malaysia overall. Weather is somewhat similar in both places, being tropical and hot year-round. Both have rainy seasons that you need to plan around. Phuket's west coast is better in the November to April period, while the Perhentian Islands on Malaysia's east coast are best from March to October. Langkawi and Penang on Malaysia's west coast have similar timing to Phuket. So this is mostly a wash depending on when you visit and which parts of Malaysia you're going to. The visa situation favors Malaysia slightly for many travelers. Most nationalities get visa-free entry to Malaysia for stays up to 90 days. Thailand typically gives 30 days visa-free to most nationalities, though you can extend or do visa runs if needed. Neither is particularly complicated, but Malaysia's longer automatic stay is convenient if you want to slow travel. Let me be clear about something important. This isn't me saying Phuket is a bad destination or that nobody should go there. Millions of people visit Phuket every year and have wonderful times. It has beautiful beaches, excellent food, lots of activities, and good tourism infrastructure. For some people with specific preferences or circumstances, Phuket might actually be the better choice. If you want a more predictable, packaged tourism experience with lots of other tourists around, Phuket delivers that efficiently. But for me, and I suspect for many travelers who watch videos like this, Malaysia offered something more valuable. It offered authenticity, diversity, better value, more genuine cultural experiences, healthier natural environments, and moments of unexpected joy. It felt like discovery rather than consumption. It felt like travel rather than just tourism. The question in my title was whether these two destinations are even close as competitors. And my answer, after 3 weeks of intensive testing and comparison, is no, they're not close. Malaysia is significantly better for the type of travel experience I value. The gap is wider than I expected it to be when I started this journey. If I had to go back to one of these places tomorrow, I would choose Malaysia without hesitation. In fact, I'm already planning my return trip to explore the parts one didn't get to see. I want to visit Borneo and see the orangutans and explore the rainforests. I want to spend more time in the Cameron Highlands and the tea plantations. I want to go to Malacca and learn more about its Portuguese and Dutch colonial history. Malaysia revealed itself to be a destination with incredible depth that would take multiple trips to fully appreciate. Phuket, on the other hand, I feel like I experienced what it has to offer, and while it was fine, I don't feel a pull to return anytime soon. Maybe in 10 or 15 years if things change significantly, or if I'm traveling with people who specifically want to go there, but it's not on my personal wish list. The biggest surprise in all of this was realizing how much my preconceptions shaped my expectations. I went into this thinking Thailand would win easily because of its reputation. Thailand is more famous, more talked about, more recommended in travel circles. Everyone knows about Thai beaches and Thai food and Thai hospitality. Malaysia is less well-known, less hyped, less visible in travel media. But that obscurity is actually part of its advantage. It hasn't been as transformed by mass tourism yet. It still has that magic that Thailand probably had decades ago before everyone discovered it. I hope this video helps you make a better decision about where to spend your time and money in Southeast Asia. Both destinations have their merits, but they offer fundamentally different experiences. Think about what you actually value in travel. If you want ease and convenience and familiar tourism infrastructure with lots of other travelers around, Phuket works. If you want authenticity and value and diversity and genuine discovery, Malaysia is unmatched. Your travel money and vacation time are precious resources. You can't get them back. Spend them somewhere that's going to give you memories and experiences and stories worth keeping. For me, that place was Malaysia by a mile, and I don't think it's even a close competition anymore.